Hi everyone, thanks for checking out this video. Okay, so we're getting to the point now where we're almost done with this second project. And yeah, we basically did the GWAS already and found these like interesting SNPs where it seems like there could possibly be an association between the SNP genotype and the zombie phenotype. So yeah, we did all of that, and then in the last video I showed you guys how to investigate some of these SNPs with the UCSC genome browser. And then in this video I'm going to show you guys how to make a plot that's one of the more common plots that's often used to communicate results of GWAS analyses, and it's called a Manhattan plot. So before I show you guys the code for it, I'll first show you just what the final result is going to look like. So here's the final result of the Manhattan plot that we're going to make. So if you guys see on the horizontal axis, we have the different chromosome numbers here. And then on the vertical axis, we have this somewhat complicated looking math expression, negative log 10 p-value. So I'll explain what that means in just a second. So yeah, first let's just talk about what these dots are. So each one of these dots is one of the SNPs that we tested in our GWAS analysis. So remember, we had like 44,000 or so different SNPs. Each one of these dots represents one of the SNPs, and on the horizontal axis, the dots are plotted according to both their chromosome number and their actual position on that chromosome, basically. So yeah, the dots are positioned according to their chromosome number and their actual position along that chromosome. And then the goal of this Manhattan plot is basically to show, to visualize the significance or non-significance of different SNPs, basically. So if you guys remember, we calculated a p-value for each SNP, and then we did our like Bonferroni correction, and then we found some that were significant after the Bonferroni correction. And if you guys remember, like with p-values, the lower the p-value is, the less likely you'd be to see a result that extreme due to coincidence. So it really is like the lower the p-value is, the more significant it is, basically. So basically what the vertical axis here is showing, this negative log 10 of the p-value, is basically just doing like a negative log 10 transformation on the p-value for each SNP and then plotting that. And the reason we're doing this like negative log calculation here on the p-values is basically just to transform the p-values so that after this transformation, smaller p-values, meaning p-values that are closer to 0, will result in a larger positive number after this negative log 10 transformation we're doing. So basically we're just taking like the smallest p-values and transforming them to make them the largest positive numbers, so that we can basically plot the significance like this, so that the most significant p-values the most significant SNPs, I mean, rather than having the smallest values on this vertical axis, they instead have the largest like positive values on this axis, basically. And then we're also showing a dashed line here, which is the significance threshold for the significance after the Bonferroni correction. So we can see that to whatever degree we care about this like binary significance threshold, we can see which SNPs fell above this threshold and which fell below. And of course, the vast majority of them fell below the significance threshold. But we can see the ones that fell above it, and then we can actually trace down to see what chromosome they were on. And so yeah, that's kind of the idea. It's basically just a way of like visualizing the SNPs that came up significant and visualizing their like chromosome number and then position basically. And yeah, it's called a Manhattan plot. And yeah, this is one of the more common types of plots you see that's used to communicate GWAS results basically. So yeah, I'm going to show you guys how to make this plot. Again, before we actually do the code, I'll remind you guys, if you want to get a hold of this code, it's up on my GitHub. Here's the link, and I'll also put a link in the description. And the notebook is genomics.ipynb, and then genomics.py is the same code, but just a regular Python file. Okay. So first things first, to make this plot, we're going to just go through basically, in fact, maybe I'll show you guys in case anyone forgot. In this filtered SNP info, the first column of this, and I'll just show you guys like the first couple. Yeah, the first column is these SNP IDs that are strings that have first the chromosome number, so this is chromosome 1, and then a colon, and then the actual like coordinate position on that chromosome basically. So what we're going to do first is just like iterate through these SNP IDs and then break them up to get actual numbers, like actual int numbers for both the chromosome and the position, so that we can use these actual numbers when we're making this plot basically. So yeah, basically it's doing a little bit of like string manipulation to get the chromosome and position. And again, here just like replacing this CHR with just nothing, and then converting the chromosome number and position both into ints. And then we'll just append those to our list of filtered chromosomes and filtered positions. And we want these for all of the filtered SNPs, because those are all the ones we did our GWAS analysis on. We don't only want the significant ones, because we are also plotting the non-significant ones, and in fact that's almost all of them, and that's kind of the point of the plot, is to plot all the SNPs that you check so that you can see all the non-significant ones as well as the significant ones, and then try to see like the location of the significant ones basically. Okay, so we can go ahead and run that. And then the next thing to do, like we talked about, is the negative log 10 transformation on the p-values. Basically just turning the smallest p-values, the p-values closest to 0, into the largest positive numbers. Okay, so we'll run that. And then, yeah, so the next part of the code is very confusing, and it's definitely not important to memorize all of this syntax. In fact, here at this point, I'd like to like quickly ask you guys if you notice anything like suspicious or interesting about any of this code in this block. So I don't know if you guys want to like pause and like just take a look, but yeah, I'll just put it to you guys if you notice anything possibly suspicious or interesting or unusual about this block of code. Okay, so the answer is that this code was written by ChatGPT. I did not write this code myself. What I did to make this code was I asked ChatGPT how to make a Manhattan plot in Python, and it wrote this code for me. So you guys can maybe see it's like better commented than my code actually. So yeah, this code was written by ChatGPT. And yeah, before we run this, yeah, I guess I'll just briefly tell you guys like my own personal rule for using ChatGPT and like other LLMs for programming. So my personal rule is that I'll never trust ChatGPT's word on anything basically. For any code that I need, I'll never like only trust ChatGPT based on faith. I'll only use ChatGPT and other LLMs for basically things where I can easily check if it's getting it right or not. Yeah, so the use case is that I'll use ChatGPT for things that are difficult for me to do, but if ChatGPT gives me a block of code, I can very quickly check if ChatGPT is getting it right or not. In fact, it's a little bit like the if you guys know like the P versus NP problem in computer science. Basically like situations where it's hard to come up with an answer to a question, but if someone gives you an answer, you can easily check if their answer is correct or not. It's a little bit like that, basically. That's my own personal rule, is that my use cases for these LLMs are situations where it would be difficult for me to come up with this block of code, but if ChatGPT gives me a block of code, I can easily check if it's getting it right or not, and I don't have to take anything on faith or just trust ChatGPT for its word, because it does hallucinate things sometimes. It does sometimes get things wrong. But yeah, plots like these are a great use case for ChatGPT, because it would take a long time to like look up all the matplotlib syntax and like get all of this figured out, how to make this Manhattan plot. But with ChatGPT, yeah, like it can just give you a block of code, and then you can run it and then quickly check if it's getting it right or not, basically. So yeah, that's my own personal rule for when I use ChatGPT for programming. I never trust it, but I use it for things where I can quickly check if it's getting it right. Okay, so with that being said, we can go ahead and run this code. And yeah, that gives us our result. And yeah, so like I said, in terms of checking if it's getting it right, yeah, like an easy sanity check is to just like see how many SNPs landed above this significance threshold for the different chromosomes. So we can see in the plot, one SNP on chromosome 1 was above the significance threshold. So we can then check in our actual list of SNPs and check and see, yes, there was one and only one SNP on chromosome 1 that came up significant. So what about chromosome 2? There should be on chromosome 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 significant SNPs. We can check in the plot and see 1, 2, 3, 4. And then chromosome 3 should be 1. Yeah, chromosome 3, 1. Chromosome 4 should be 0. Yeah, chromosome 4, 0. And yeah, you guys get the idea. But that would be the way that you would check ChatGPT's work to like make sure that this plot is actually correct. You could go through and do that for all the chromosomes if you wanted to. And yeah, so I guess the last thing I'll say is this is what the plot looks like for our like mock data set. Again, this whole project, of course, with the whole zombie apocalypse thing. Yeah, like I just made this up as like a fake example for us. In some ways, this plot is not exactly what you would expect to see in like a real Manhattan plot, though. So I'll show you guys an example of a real one. Okay, it's okay. So yeah, this is an example of a real Manhattan plot from an actual paper. So before I tell you guys the answer, I'll first again put it to you guys. If you notice any differences between this real Manhattan plot and our Manhattan plot. So this is the real one, and then here's ours. Real, ours. Yeah, maybe just if you guys want to like pause and think about it for a second, if you notice any differences. Okay, so one difference at least is that in the real Manhattan plot, we can see that the SNPs that came up significant for whatever phenotype they were studying looks like anorexia nervosa. Yeah, the SNPs that were associated with this phenotype in this real GWAS, the significant SNPs tended to be close to each other in terms of being on the same chromosome and also having close positions to each other. So if you guys see here, this whole line of dots is all different SNPs, but they look like they're in a vertical line just because they tended to be close to each other in terms of position and also on the same chromosome. And then there's another cluster of them over here. And yeah, basically the clusters of ones that were like that were significant, yeah, they tended to like cluster together in terms of position on the same chromosome. And ours don't do that, just because yeah, again, I made up just like a mock data set, so it was not totally like biologically realistic. But yeah, it's pretty understandable like why it might do that. It could just be like this position on a particular chromosome, maybe chromosome 3, like this position. Maybe all of these are on the same gene or like nearby the same gene, maybe in a promoter region or something. Maybe this is just a particular gene that is related to this phenotype of anorexia nervosa, and then maybe on that particular gene, there's a lot of SNPs that play a role basically. Could also be that maybe there's only one SNP here that really plays a role, but a bunch of other SNPs tend to get inherited together with that one SNP that is actually playing a role. That's something called like linkage disequilibrium, which is another complication that I left out of this educational project just because we were kind of doing like a simplified version of this. But yeah, that is another possible reason. It could be that in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that maybe not all of these SNPs are actually causally related to the phenotype, but maybe there's like one SNP that's like actually playing a role in causing the phenotype, but then a bunch of other SNPs that are on positions that tend to get inherited together with that one SNP that is actually playing a role. So I'll be like looking into stuff like that is like another possible complication you might run into in like a real life GWAS, like looking into that like linkage disequilibrium it's called. But yeah, we're just doing like a simplified version, so I didn't get too much into that for our project. And by the way, one more thing that's kind of interesting. If any of you guys are wondering why it's called a Manhattan plot, it's because like the clustered peaks like this actually look like the Manhattan skyline in New York City. So it's kind of cool. If you look at Manhattan from like across the Hudson River, the skyline kind of looks like these peaks of skyscrapers and buildings. So yeah, I think that's where the name comes from. But yeah, that's all I have for this video. If any of you guys have any questions, just let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer them. And yeah, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.